So this topic around what are we doing from a technology standpoint across the globe, and how does technology and education really begin to overlap, and how do we build collaborations, is something that we want to focus on today. And so certainly this is an issue that we need to look at from a global perspective, but then also focus specifically on Latin America and what are the issues that we need to be aware of, what are the differences that we have to look forward to in each of the individual countries, and really personalizing the kind of technology that we have. And how do we look at this broader scope of how do you put technology and how do you include digital inclusion in the things that we do while making sure that it's focused on actionable results. And so it's a combination of collaboration around really being specific in the things that we're doing, and also to be able to leverage technology not just for technology's sake, but to see how it can blend and really work alongside educational reform to help students, to help teachers, and to help parents really realize the greater capacity for students. Because one of the interesting statistics is although you now have 80% of students within Brazil who are actually graduating and moving on to primary education in comparison to about 50% in 1990, only 40% of those students are going to secondary education. And those who are coming out of secondary education are doing so without the skills that are needed in order to hire them and for them to really start their careers. So what do we need to do to leverage technology to increase the capacity they have, as well as to train them and train teachers to see what we need to have as far as skills for them to be able to enter the workforce. And so one of the conversations that got started at the table was around technology, and really, is technology a means to an end, or is it something that once you put it in the hands of someone, they'll know how to use it? And so Jorge, I would love for you to start the conversation about how do we look at technology in a way that is greater than just the device?
So, thank you. The way we look at this in Mexico, considering the great skill and both digital divide, is education is conformed to several pillars. One of them being teachers, students, and content. And the problem is we've forgotten what the incentives are behind the users of this. And we have this ability to dump technology all over the world as if it was a problem of hardware. And I wish you could open a computer and that would make you rich and intelligent, but unfortunately that's not the case. And we've been doing this continually without understanding the cultural differences of all the countries and how we make sure that it responds to the incentives these people have. Education is something very abstract to sell, especially to the bottom of the pyramid. So what are the incentives behind what we are giving people, and how is it going to make them more productive? If we ask those simple questions, we can make sure technology has a purpose in development, basically.
And what have you seen as some changes? So over the last several years, as you've been involved in this field and with your organization, what have you seen that's actually driving us in that direction, that technology is really used as an asset to push along what we're doing versus trying to be the silver bullet?
Depends on the user. For example, what we're focused a lot on is small kids. The thing with small kids is that the people that are going to take them to the schools and pay for the courses are the mothers. So what are you telling the mothers and how you understand them? And in our case, is just explaining to the mothers of the bottom of the pyramid that they're going to be better off if their kids are better off. So that's an easy way of selling it to mothers, at least. And to entrepreneurs or bigger people, just making them more productive.
And Miguel, so to follow up on the conversation that we were having there, what is the nuance to that conversation of technology being important, and one of the things that you've done is really help every child to have a laptop? How do you use the laptop beyond just the technical device, the hardware, but really getting into how it's sharing learning?
Okay. Thank you very much for the invitation. Let me cover a couple of things. I come from Uruguay. Uruguay is a small country. In our assets, we won the World Cup twice for being a small country, and we're coming back in June, so we enjoy all this summer, this winter, the games. But we come from a very small country. And we decided that to have a laptop and internet is a right. Social inclusion means that all the kids in the country need to have the same right as the rich kids or the middle-class kids. Because if I ask here everybody and I ask raise your hands, whoever bought a computer, just tell me who has bought a computer to his child or received a computer when you were young. Raise your hands. Many people bought computers for their children, right? So we decided that it's a right for a child to have a computer. So we are not concerned so much, is it right, is it wrong? It's right the same way it's right to have electricity in school, right? Now, we have to think. Now we have kids with technology, we have kids with internet, we have kids in all the schools have a wideband, a broadband, very good quality. Now, why do we do it? We do it because that's the only way that in the 21st century you will be able to introduce other type of things like new programs for learning, new programs for teaching, new ways of doing. But without questioning all the time, if you are doing, it's very important, how does it impact on mathematics? Many people ask me, and I say, when you put electricity in schools, did you ask how did it impact it in mathematics? No, you know you have to have it. I think the core question is, why is it that technology has impacted so hard in our lives in the last 30 years, but specifically in the last 10 years, and has impacted zero on education? Zero. Because, and that is the key question. Now we are seeing in the last couple of years movements of different philosophy. But one of the big problems was that technology was something that the private sector wanted to sell to the education environment. And we've been flooded in the last 30 years with different ideas, right? And I normally, the one that I really don't understand is we had tons of classes of children in school or high school learning how to do or how to use a word processing. Instead of discussing why don't we teach the children to program, and then we have the private sector investing in children programming, we have a lot of people doing things in class that has nothing to do with technology or with education. The challenge is how do you mix pedagogy with technology? And today is a challenge for Uruguay, for Brazil, for the US, for the UK, and for every country you want. So I think that we have to solve the infrastructure first, right? Whatever it costs, everyone has to have access. Then we have to discuss, or at the same time we have to discuss what are the best ways to motivate the children, motivate the teachers, train the teachers. But imagine that everybody talks about training teachers. No one trains the teacher how to go in a bike. No one trains the teacher how to use a phone. So software has to be as easy as using Skype or the messenger on the phone, because it's, I mean, and I appreciate very much the effort that everyone is doing in Latin America to train teachers. It's a complicated issue. But we have to change the discussion. I don't want to.
No, I think it's a really important discussion because I think people are confused and we're uncertain what comes first. The tools within the classroom or educating the teachers to be able to use them in an effective way so they're just not taking children and putting them in front of the laptop, but they're actually realizing how best to leverage that technology to teaching. And I think you've pointed out that we haven't done a great job of teaching the teachers yet how to use those types of things.
But the kids have the technology in their hands. How many kids have cellulars in Brazil, in Argentina, in Uruguay? How many kids have tablets? So we better move around and let them use it in school for good purpose. I mean, we cannot go on discussing if it's the best method. Any method that introduces technology is good. We have to discuss how we empower the children. But you have to empower, you have to have technology in the hands of the children. If not, you will have discussions on we prepare the teachers, then we prepare the inspectors, then we prepare the headmasters, and then we're going to introduce technology that has nothing to do with what we've prepared in the last years, the teachers, the inspectors, or the headmasters.
Danielle, how do you, at Novo, in the 19 schools that you have, when you're looking at things like blended learning, we talked about flipped classrooms, how do you leverage the technology? And to this question, what comes first? Do the kids come in knowing how to use this, and so it's really up to the people who are overseeing the school as well as the teachers to introduce that? But then how do you get the teachers also involved? Because I think there's some teacher training that you do as well.
Thank you. Can you hear me? So I think even before, whether it's the hardware or the training for the teachers, I think it's the purpose behind what do you want technology to do. In our case, our goal is to bring excellent, affordable, and scalable education to all Peruvian children. And once we sort of had that figured out, we started trying to understand where we wanted technology to fit in. So blended learning was one of the things we did. And once we had that decided and sort of, okay, we want a percentage of the classroom, of the time in school to be spent sort of in a self-paced learning environment, then we provided started sourcing the what computers we're going to have, what software we're going to have, what type of teacher training we're going to have. And then it was once that was figured out, then we started introducing students into it. But the introduction of students is, I think, the easiest part of all, because they're already so familiar with everything. And some teachers will already by themselves start using technology in their classrooms and incorporate them into their teaching. But with most of our teachers, we've had to guide them through this process. It's sort of not that they're not digital natives like the students.
Well, and I think it's interesting, the conversation that we were having at the table around how you might roll out the whole flipped classroom model. And if you could talk about, because I think when you're working with a flipped classroom, having the technology and really finding ways to leverage that and allow exploration, which might be easier for some teachers because the students will be able to explore and then come back and then the teacher can facilitate the discussion. But how are you looking at that really being a part of leveraging technology as well as mentoring and different things within the classroom?
So I think in the case of flipped instruction, basically what we're doing is giving kids resources, or kids a way to access resources before coming into the class, so they come into the class more prepared and take the discussion to the next level, sort of instead of just being introduced to a topic in the class. And I think that actually, instead of having, I guess, to train teachers to give them resources, the challenge for us right now is to train teachers to be comfortable in a setting where the students know more than them. So it's not about how the kids are using the technology and how, I guess, they're finding all these resources, but how teachers are facilitating this discussion then in the classroom. And for that, we're actually facilitating laptops through loans for parents, through 2-year loans, because we don't have any Innovas yet in Peru. So kids need a way to access technology and have easy access to it at home. So we actually are providing laptops for the flipped instruction model to work.
And Mariana, one of the discussions that we've had is, I think as corporations, we're not exactly sure where we fit in and what we should be doing. And so as a corporate, you're interested in helping, and we're not educators. So we're kind of guessing our way through the system, and you are an educator, and so you have both the educational side as well as the corporation side. But really having an appreciation over what we need to be told to do so that we can actually facilitate it being done, whether it's hardware, whether it's training, whether it's content. So what are the challenges and what are the things that you've seen in that area?
Actually, thank you, Shannon. Let me say that this is a very important year for us because we are celebrating the 10th anniversary of our Partners in Learning program. We are global, definitely, and we have global engines as the Partners in Learning network, in which more than 1 million teachers participate. But having said that, we understand that to be local and relevant locally, we need to understand the local needs. And talking about Latin America, we are talking about diversity, no? Of course, there is a huge opportunity around the efforts that our governments are doing to provide access. Of course, the pioneer is here, Uruguay represented by Miguel, or in the case of my own country, the program Conectar Igualdad, that almost provided 4 million devices. Our executive director, Silvina Wirtz, is here. We are so proud of the efforts that the region is doing, providing access, but at the same time, the open question is how to inspire educational challenge. For that, we need to be flexible, and we need to have flexible models, approach, resources, training programs. In the case of Partners in Learning, that's our challenge, not to be local, relevant, and that means developing initiatives that are from on-site to online, from global engines to working with local partners. In talking about local partners, this means hardware integrators, today publishers, universities, NGOs. Bringing all this stuff together means understanding the local agenda, which are the top priorities for Miguel or for Silvina. And for that, we are working through local teams, some of which have educators as me.
And what do you think as, when you look at that challenge, I think we're not sure exactly, as we were saying, what is needed out there. And how do you have those conversations? Is it with government? I know we've had different conversations even in the U.S. saying, tell us what you need. Tell us what you need, and we're happy to help facilitate it. But then there's even such disagreement over what is the priority. Is it math? Is it science? What is the priority, and where do we start? Are those the similar discussions that you're having?
Yeah, I believe that for us it's critical to work on the development of public-private partnerships, no? And with all these representatives sit at the table, the key is to understand that there are so many needs in regions as Latin America, but we need to bring a kind of agreement on the top 3 or the top 1 if necessary. Actually, we have been talking today about the problem, let's say, crisis in the secondary level. We can have just one commitment as a society, which is providing all the investment and resources in order to support that the secondary students finish the level and have the same opportunities to get a very good job and to access higher ed. So that's clear. Maybe it's just one, but we need to work on that kind of agreements.
I think one thing has to be clear for all of us. Technology has to... One thing, no, they're changing. No, okay? Thank you. I think it's very important what Mariana said. We need to have, first, one focus. In our case, our focus is technology has to help us to personalize education. If you think in the past, 500 years ago, education was very personal because you had a tutor and 5 children. Then the Industrial Revolution came and all the 6-year-olds go together, the 7-year-olds go together, no one cares how do you divide. Now, the only challenge today is that the teacher has to access each of them, and it's getting difficult, right? So technology has to be a pillar in personalizing education. That can be done. We are not just hardware. We first integrated the hardware, the infrastructure, the fiber optics, the video conference. Today, we are basically discussing contents. I was telling them we have a mathematical platform with 100,000 exercises that covers 10 grades. Every student can get into it and he can advance, and if he has a difficulty, it goes simpler, and at the end of the day, the teacher has the information. That is personalization. Technology can be a very helpful tool to early detection when someone is going to abandon secondary school. That is the key issue. Now, we have technology, but to stop abandonment, we need to cover the students with support. It's not possible to do it with technology. We have to have in mind always that technology is just a tool. It's not a neutral tool, but it's a tool. You have to invest in the other parts. It's following the kid, seeing what's his difficulty, why did he get there, right? And that is a lot of work of human nature and of affection and worrying from the teacher. Most of the kids that abandon is that no one cares for them, right? We will not solve that with technology. The only thing that technology will help us is to detect very, very early who to support.
And that's interesting. That goes with your conversation earlier, Jorge, about needing a hug, right? This isn't just about taking the teacher out of it and suddenly having somebody alone at their computer in a very personalized setting, working through math problems and working at their own pace, but making sure that there's still somebody, because in Mexico, that teacher represented far more than just somebody who was teaching you a lesson. They were somebody who was also there to care for you in a meaningful way that helped then you progress and that you remember to this day being somebody who was behind you from the very beginning.
I mean, it's been talked about in different ways, and we have to remember who we're giving this technology to. One of the big problems with this bullish idea of technology in education is that sometimes technology in education is designed for non-humans. And you have this theoretical idea of a platform where everyone can collaborate and everyone can do all these things. And if you don't think that you're designing technology for humans, it won't work. If you don't understand the cultural background of different states, I mean, in Mexico only, every single municipality is like a different country in itself. And the difference with that is we need to empower the teacher, not eliminate the teacher. So we disagree with this idea of the end of the teacher. we believe that this is the beginning of the super rock star teacher, in the way where they'll be able to know how each student is doing, they'll be able to know who's falling behind, who's going in advance, and this helps the teachers become great teachers. Why? At least in Latin countries, you cannot, the 100% online model does not work, and I would challenge the fact that it's going to work in the future, maybe in Scandinavian countries, maybe in South Korea, where people read 10 books a year. Maybe they'll have the discipline to do it, but in Latin America, at least in Mexico, you need a mentor. You need a teacher, as we were saying, to tell you you're doing fine, and maybe he won't even help you, but you need that much more than just being in front of a computer, especially when you're young.
And that goes on even to the conversations being had around MOOCs and how do they fit in, and from a technology standpoint, is having one great teacher that's out there and being able to suddenly get the message across to 2.5 million students, is that better than having individualized college and university experience? And I think your point was no, it's really that combination of one, there's been a lot of emphasis right now on that set of technology, but not necessarily understanding the totality of what that could take away.
Very, very quickly, MOOCs are very cool, but they're not good for every absolute course. An example, everyone's so excited about mobile learning. I really have no idea what could beat algebra except a pen and a paper, a pencil and a paper. How are you going to do algebra on a smartphone? It doesn't matter how, nothing will beat a pen and a paper. So we have to be careful when we want technology to replace all aspects of education.
Yeah, I was just going to add, in our case, what we've seen building on Jorge's idea of the teacher with a different role is that the teacher now is a facilitator. So in this blended learning model, when students are all at their computers doing self-paced learning, you still have the teacher walking around with a tablet and a dashboard, just seeing where everybody is. So the goal, so with technology, you basically, everybody, instead of having sort of limited time and variable outcome, you have the same outcome in variable time, and you just guide the student through that process to get to that one outcome, and that's the role of the teacher.
In our case, we are a technology. We are a technology company, of course, but we are so. We are a technology company, but we are so focused on working with teachers. Now we definitely believe in teachers, and we believe that one of the keys to leverage technology is empowering the teachers to redesign the classic model. For that, you have many ways, many options, but in our case, we have been identifying for the last 10 years the innovative teachers, and in this year, in 2013, for the very first time, we awarded not only the teachers that are innovating in their own practices, but also the ones that have the capacity to work with others, and we are calling them educator experts. This year we are identifying more than 200 educator experts worldwide. They will be together in March in Barcelona, and the proposal of this decision is that we want to have engines in which professional developing is based on a peer coaching model, and it's you believe you can have that kind of trust when the colleague that is saying, I did this, it didn't work, but I took a second chance, and now my students are more happier. And when that is presented by your colleague, sharing that kind of experience, we believe that the change is definitely possible. Referring to schools, and we also work with schools, we are identifying mentor schools with proven track innovation records, 80 around the world, that are not only willing to continue transforming their own models and visions, but also working with others. And we identify 7 mentor schools in Latam, 2 in Brazil, that will be delivering models not designing by experts or by whoever, designing by real schools to be shared with others.
And just as your background as a teacher, this is different than what we taught teachers before, right? So suddenly you have, thousands upon thousands, and pick the country of teachers that are out there who didn't go through a model of they were going to be facilitators. They were given a textbook potentially that they were going to train to. And now we're saying this is all changing, and yet is that changing? Is the expectation not only more attractive when somebody gets into teachers, that being a facilitator is maybe more attractive than a teacher, but then also how do you actually teach the ones who have been in the system for so long that model change?
Yeah, definitely. And one of the keys here, Shannon, is collaboration. Actually, I am a teacher at Buenos Aires University. I've been teaching there for the last 25 years. But when I think about those practices, I think in my team, I think in 20 other teachers that are working together with me, and we have been sharing experiences for the last 2 decades. That's different. That's a different approach. Today, when we are talking about 21st century learning, we are thinking about collaboration. And if collaboration works for students in the classroom, it also works for professional development. So we are trying to leverage that concept in order to put the right strategies in place.
I think that teachers are essential. Teachers are absolutely essential. The only thing is that Sugata Mitra used to say, the question of the new teacher is you have to have a teacher that makes the right question now. Before he has the knowledge is in the web now. The kid in class with whatever device, he's checking if what the teacher is saying is right or wrong. So, but that is something that it's changing in Uruguay. Teachers are changing. I mean, with our program or without our program, that was going to happen more now that we have more devices. But I go back from what we've been discussing. It looks like technology is the pillar, and technology is not the pillar. I mean, in Uruguay, the average use in primary school of a laptop in class is around 1 hour per day, less 45 minutes. Is that a lot or not? We don't know. What we need to think is, what type of pedagogy? How do we do collaborative work? How do we do collaborative if we are not present? How do we have internet at home so that the kids can collaborate outside school? Because if not, we're going to take out the focus. The focus is how to use, what's the new pedagogy of 21st century? And how can the private sector support? Because there's a lot to be done. A lot of money has to be invested to find those ways. And perhaps it won't be a result in the next year or 2 years on what is needed. But that's the essence, because today no one has the clue. There's no country in the world that has solved the pedagogy issue. Every one of us is trying, and probably everybody of you in your country is trying too. So there's where the money has to go, to research, to see how can we improve mathematics through new curriculum, not through the device. I agree with him that it's impossible to do algebra on a smartphone. Maybe someone will come, but what about games? What about games to ways of teaching? That's in very, very essence. I mean, we've tested it in Uruguay and it works fine. Kids learn how to do mathematics through games. That's easy. But the industry is not doing games.
Right. And what do you think, and this is a question for everyone, when you look at what we need to do and how we need to get there, how do we start the conversation? I was saying I was at a meeting in Washington, D.C. a couple of weeks ago, sitting around with the Department of Education and many people within some private companies, but then other people just in other nonprofits and parts of education. And we had this conversation about what can organizations do to invest? We have the dollars, we have resources, what do you want us to focus on? And there was a lot of back and forth over what that would be. As soon as a conversation was started around technology, there was other people in the room saying, no, you know, technology, there's other investments we want before technology because we're not ready for technology. And then as soon as one thing was mentioned around content and maybe we could have some content created, then somebody else said, no, it's not up to you all to do the content, that's really up to the government to do the content. So it was a back and forth, and we ended that you had several companies who were ready to be able to make some funding, and we walked out of the room giving nothing to anybody because there was no agreement from a government side or a nonprofit side over what were the 1 or 2 or 3 things that we could agree on. It was just a million different things, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So how do you have those conversations?
That's lack of leadership. I'm sorry. If no one knows what to do, it's lack of leadership. Our countries know what to do. They fix an agenda. They may make mistakes. They correct it. I mean, the U.S. has decided to do broadband to every school, and I think it's fantastic. And people are discussing that in the U.S. In the U.S., you discuss everything, right? You're becoming Latin American, right? I mean, discuss everything. Now you discuss and don't do. I mean, it's obvious that you have to have broadband in the schools. It may cost money, yes, reduce the cost of it. In our program, we decided that our program cannot cost more than 5% of the cost of a student per year. Because it's over 5%, it's very expensive. So it costs $100 per student per year, right? Cost is an issue in the US too, right? But the lack of agenda is the lack of leadership, I'm sorry.
No, and I agree. And Mariana, though, it's the same thing that you've heard.
Actually, yes. In our case, coming from the private sector, we need to understand the priorities of the leaders of the government. No, if again it is the secondary level, it is math. Do we want to have how many engineers in the next decade? Well, we need to understand that agenda and to align our resources. That's definitely easier for us. And of course, we are willing to participate in those conversations, but we need to understand which is, let's again, the top three, no? That's enough.
Daniela, are you getting it pretty clear in Peru what those top three things are that your schools and others should be focused on and how you can get investors to focus on those things?
I just think there's just so much to do, I mean, honestly, but I think where we started was in math and reading, just like focusing on math and reading, and we didn't focus on, well, we didn't want to build any content on our own. We wanted to find what was out there and then implement it in our schools, and we actually ended up having to develop our own software for one of the courses. But then, once that was chosen and we knew what we wanted, then it was all about the teacher training. And that's where we're investing, and it's not only teacher training for the use of blended learning, but just teacher training in general, where we're investing most heavily on, because that's our biggest bottleneck this year. I mean, not this year, but up to this, right now we have like 500 teachers hired, and given the sort of hiring ratios, we've had to interview almost 10,000 teachers for those positions. So it's like the biggest, it's where we're like fighting the battle right now.
And Jorge, in Mexico, because you've certainly scaled so significantly there, what is the work that's been done both with the local government and the private sector and nonprofits to help you scale?
I mean, education is a social problem. We believe that the only way to solve a social problem is with intersectorial alliances, both public-private partnerships and incorporating the social part of it as well. So you need NGOs, you need private companies, and you need government. Government gives you scale because it's the only institution that is willing to invest in problems that they have promised to fix. All that you have to do as a private side is convince them that you can do it better and cheaper. NGOs give you donations, give you free stuff. Microsoft helps us a lot with all the stuff. And the private companies make sure that the programs run efficiently. Without these three sectors, you may be able to give education to the top class of a country, but what I think everyone in this room wants is how do we scale quality education to the bottom of the pyramid? And the only way of doing that is partnering with government, partnering with NGOs, and partnering with the private side, because it's a social, complex problem that it needs everyone's help.
And we say partnering with, what does that actually mean? So what does that look like?
So for us, in our case, government builds the schools, and between us and the social sector, we run the schools. And that's basically what it means. So we managed to have a very progressive, modern government. Actually, right now, Mexico is undergoing a big educational reform as a federal constitutional reform. And then the private side is in charge of doing what the government promised, better and cheaper, basically.
I wanted to say, I think that we need to build things for the teachers, for them to be easy. In the past, teachers had to adapt to technology. It has to be the other way around. Technology has to adapt to teachers. I mean, technology today is very easy to use for many applications that are much more complex than some of the ones that have to be available for teachers. So with that mindset has to be the technology developed for the teachers, but easy to use. I mean, our role is to make life easier to the teachers. If you are private sector, government, we need to make life easier for the teachers. The teacher spends hours and hours with the children. They have to go home and make it easy. I always make the joke, we need the CSI model where you select this, Not that you go into the web and you have to spend 2 hours in the web searching what's the thing that you are looking at, and then you have 2,000 different things for an option. We have to make life easier for them. Because if not, we cannot think that we will have to train everybody 10 times in his work cycle, because there's no money that can do it.
Education is an incredibly complex topic that involves really cross-sector collaboration. Technology is a tool, and we have to make sure to use it respectfully and thoughtfully. And I really wanted to thank my panel for being exceptional and really sharing a lot of different perspectives. So thank you all for coming.